So, it's a good day. So, good morning. Today is Groundhog Day, right? Yeah, happy Groundhog Day. Happy beginning of Black History Month, which we celebrate. Yeah. Happy Lunar New Year. Many people in the world are celebrating the Year of the Snake, which I was like, how would you celebrate the Year of the Snake? And then I thought about conga lines, right? Sounds fun. So it could be fun. And happy birthday to Jim and anyone else who has a February birthday, or all of us. So happy Sunday. And we should be happy, right? Yes, there are always challenges. Yes, there's always problems or issues in the world, in our lives. But there's something innate within us that keeps moving us, guiding us towards happiness. Almost like happiness, the state of happiness is like a light that we are always being drawn to, always moving towards. Even, we know it's true. I know it's true because even the simplest things, like seeing a friend smile this morning, or making a new friend this morning, getting a hug, even sipping a sip of coffee, looking at these flowers, thinking about Elaine and about how she would have told Larry she don't like roses. These are little tiny things that bring us happiness, because happiness is, it's like our natural state. You know, so I'm a happy grandmother, and I see that happiness is the natural state of a child. It does not take much to get a baby to smile. You know, people always say when the first smile that a baby gives, it's just a little burp. I always think that's funny. But no, I mean, we're born to smile. We're born to laugh and be happy. Now, I have to admit it. It's true. I am a news junkie. It's true, and it's frustrating, and you know, I'm trying to cut down a little bit, but part of me is like, no, I'm not going to not watch the news just because I don't like what's on it. It's, you know, it's out there. I'm always aware of it. I know other people feel much happier if they never turn it on, and that's fine too. We're all individuals. We all move through the world in the way that we want to move through the world. But I have to say, after watching the news, it was really a relief when I was babysitting for my granddaughter, and I turned on Teletubbies, which is a little kid's show, and they just were like, Teletubbies. And it's like, you know, it's the same TV screen. It brings us whatever, according to the channel that we tune it to. We're at choice. So today, our topic is 5 steps to spiritual freedom. And I'm sure if you've taken classes before, you probably have guessed, oh, she means 5 steps of treatment, right? Because we always talk about 5 steps of treatment. So 5 steps of spiritual freedom. I mean, I'll give it away. It's going to be how to use affirmative prayer, spiritual mind treatment. But also, why do we have those steps? Why do we talk about that? You know, and usually when we talk about affirmative prayer, we're thinking about a need, a desire, a wish for something. And it might be not a thing, but it could just be peace of mind, or it could be healthiness. You know, we usually have something that we tend to pray for. And so I thought I would also like to just bring up the idea that it's also for spiritual freedom. Not necessarily for anything in particular, but also for spiritual freedom. And so, what is spiritual freedom? What could that possibly be? If I had said financial freedom, it would be obvious, right? It would be obvious that we would be talking about not living in poverty. But instead, we'd be talking about having enough money to do and have whatever is needed or wanted. Financial freedom is freedom from poverty. Oh, there's page 2. So we know what we mean by financial freedom. But what about spiritual freedom? So I was thinking that I might explain that spiritual freedom is a way of living confidently within one's own life experience and within one's own mental perceptions. That spiritual freedom is freedom from fear. But that seemed really vague. So I tried to think about what else I might say, and I actually thought about it a long time. And so I thought maybe we could say that spiritual freedom is existing in a state, in which we have the ability to see clearly and think clearly and understand clearly and believe clearly. But that still seemed kind of incomplete because while seeing, thinking, understanding, believing are great, why? Why are they great? And I think it is because this clarity of mind, this clarity of thinking, shifts us into a state of being that we sometimes call here cheerful expectation, which is what Carol Carnes wrote about in the reading that Morgan gave us. Can we reach that state of cheerful expectation, that comfortable state where we are relaxed and able to welcome happiness into our lives? When we're spiritually free, we're just going to naturally expect the best. And we will tend to find it. So here's a little example. And this is why, it's funny, but this is why I like pause. It wasn't that I couldn't find page 2, it was because it is so funny that someone in our audience happens to be here today who this story directly relates to in kind of like a way that I'm not really going to talk about. Except to say that I wish I had purchased the couch that I didn't. Because yesterday I sat down to meditate. And I looked across at the couch, across from me where I was sitting, which we've had for a number of years. And I've always regretted buying it because it isn't perfectly lined up. Now, Morgan and I have talked about what it means when you're a Virgo, and sometimes things have to line up perfectly. I don't believe in astrology, but I can't deny that when the seams don't line up quite right, I can't help noticing it. I always, every time I sit down, I see, oh, the stitching is off. The cushions aren't exactly the same thickness. And then, I just want to say this. After I finished my meditation on today's topic, when I opened my eyes, I suddenly saw the couch much more clearly. And suddenly I recognized that that couch actually was a testament to peace and goodwill. I remember that that couch was made in Vietnam. And I thought about Vietnam and our country's long history with Vietnam and the fact that we are at peace with Vietnam. And that fact alone represents enormous progress in the history and the growing harmony of the world. So, yes, that didn't mean the seams were straight, but I saw it in a greater context with more clarity. So can we define spiritual freedom as the freedom to see life through the eyes of love? Through the eyes of recognizing that we have blessings everywhere. So, you know, I like to talk about Pollyanna. I'm not going to talk about Pollyanna today. Positivity is great. That's not my topic. But on the other hand, I think it's important, and I do want to share one of the statements by Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, who said, and it's true, darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. And Ernest Holmes has often used the example of, it doesn't matter how dark the room is, when you flip on the light, it's light. So I now see that couch through the eyes of love. I don't need to judge so harshly anymore. And spiritual freedom, living in spiritual freedom, requires us to see for ourselves and think for ourselves. But there is a catch to it. We must be willing to open our minds enough so that we can see without constraints. So Ernest Holmes also talked about this. He said, that power, those thoughts that hold us in bondage, that is the exact same power, the exact same thoughts that free us. It's how we use it. So, if you just for a moment imagine a horse pulling a delivery cart with blinders on. Can you imagine that? A horse. Now, imagine that same horse, whatever color it was, brown, white, black, spotted. Imagine that same horse out in a lovely open pasture with apple trees, and which imaginary scene seemed happier to you? The horse is the same horse, but our idea about it has shifted. The whole shift takes place within our mind, within our imagination. So, is it good for a horse to be happy? Yeah. Is it good for a person to be happy? Yes. A child, an adult, we do have this built-in desire that we relate to happiness. So why? Why do you think it is? Why do we tend to want happiness in the very same way as a green plant growing towards the sun? So I want to share something that Ernest Holmes, who was the founder of our new thought philosophy, religious science, said, and I think it sheds some light on why we want to be happy and free. He said, and I guess this is why I like it, he said, it's simple. It's simple enough to understand the philosophy of the ages. It's simple to come to believe that whatever you call it, there is only one power in the universe. There is only one presence. There is only one final law, and it is good. It is love. We call it God. It is where we are. We are in it. Since it is present everywhere, it is in us. He goes on. It is easy enough to understand and believe what the great and the good and the wise have taught. God is incarnated in me, in all of us. There is one life. That life is God. That life is my life. Therefore, in me is the power. And he said, now I, each one of us, is not the power. But in me is the power. The same power that sets the stars in their courses within me. And I didn't put it there. It is not by the grace of anything I did. I didn't earn it. I wasn't intelligent enough to have created myself. I believe that every person is on the pathway of an eternal progress, forever themselves and never less. He goes on. Jesus taught this. Emerson taught it. Plato taught it. The ancient Egyptians taught it. It's the basic principle of ancient Hinduism. It's the very cornerstone of science, because everybody knows that everything is in a state of evolution, and we believe that this evolution is an effect of that which is incarnated in us. There is within us that seed of perfection, that divine spark. I agree with him. And speaking for myself now, I believe it is that divine spark in us which gently guides us. It's always available, and it gently guides us toward creating and experiencing happiness in that very same way that a flower turns to the sun. There's an underlying reason why spiritual principles and practices work. And I think it's important that we keep it in mind. Because when we're just like reading about and trying out mindfulness, meditation, affirmative prayer, it really, really helps to recognize that we're not simply training neurons in our brain. We are actually engaging in communion with the creative mind of the universe itself. And doing so can bring us spiritual freedom. Now, Ernest Holmes taught people to use spiritual mind treatment or affirmative prayer in a scientific and logical manner. So he didn't invent it. You can look at the Bible and you can see that Jesus said, "It is done to you as you believe." Ernest Holmes figured out a way to teach other people, not named Jesus of Nazareth, how to do it also, right? I mean, think about it. Even the disciples were said to have asked Jesus, well, how come we don't get the same results as you? Right? So we're learning to use it. So after Ernest Holmes kind of figured out how to do it, some of his students, who then were called on to teach more people, figured out, let's break it down into 5 easy steps that people can easily remember because they have 5 fingers. So we do call it the 5 steps of treatment. But you could also call it the 5 steps of getting in touch with your spiritual freedom. The 5 steps to changing your whole world, to becoming free and living in freedom. And so I'm just going to go over the 5 steps quickly. The first step is recognition. And that is the main thing that I have talked about so far. Recognition is recognizing that everything, everywhere, always must be a creation of something. Not my creation, not our creation. A creation of something, which I generally call spirit. But everybody needs to think about it in their own way. You can use the word God, creative consciousness, the absolute. Or in his later years, Ernest Holmes often just called it life. It doesn't matter what you call it. What matters is that you allow yourself to recognize that not only does it exist, it is the only thing there is. There is nothing else. There's no outside force. There's nothing in opposition. It's just like the idea that without the light, it seems like there's darkness, but there's no darkness. It's just a matter of turning on the light. This thing is the cause of everything. We don't have to turn on the light. It's already there. We just have to be willing to see it, to accept that it exists. So what does the Creator create from? This is kind of something that other people who teach mindfulness don't really go into, but I do believe it's the reason why our prayer treatments can be so amazingly effective, because we understand that since the Creator, if you want to call it, since life is all there is, that necessarily means that the only way it can create is by becoming that which is created. So Spirit creates by becoming, and yet it's never used up, exhausted, or limited by its creation. It is infinite. Spirit creates by becoming, and that's why we sometimes call it first cause. The underlying cause of the universe and anything beyond the universe that we're not aware of. This first cause, universal spirit, is omniscient, all-knowing. It is omnipotent, all-powerful. And this is sometimes the real trick, it is omnipresent. Omnipresent, fully present everywhere, not partly present somewhere. It's not like 1% in this flower and 3% in a song. No, it's fully present because it's indivisible. And that's really important to know, because the first step in obtaining this state of mind that I'm calling spiritual freedom, recognition, is understanding that we live in a spiritual universe. That we are, and this is the second step, that we are then naturally spiritual beings. You're the place. And this is amazing. I mean, it's taken me a long time to really adjust to this fact. Each one of us, you are the very center of consciousness, where creative consciousness is becoming conscious of its own reality and its own ability to create. Everything that you are learning, understanding, feeling, experiencing, remember, you're a center in the infinite. You're a center of consciousness in infinite creative consciousness. Everything you are experiencing, infinite creative consciousness is experiencing. You know, sometimes language just doesn't seem like enough when it comes to explaining this idea. But if you think about human beings in a certain way, you can think about how human beings are always out there, busy, busy, busy. You know, turning things over, making discoveries, trying things out, thinking about them, having these feelings, emotion, making decisions, making lots of mistakes, making choices. That's what human beings do. Now, what we call God, the thing itself, is not a being. You can think of it as beingness. It's infinite, it's all-knowing, and it's non-judgmental, it's perfect. Beingness doesn't really have eyes or ears, yet it has everything, because it is everything, and part of that everything is us too. Therefore, we say that you and I are each an individualized expression of this beingness, which is why I can say it's aware of itself through us. This beingness is the only thing, and it is all things. So the first step in attaining a sense of spiritual freedom is the recognition of this beingness, God, Spirit, creative consciousness, divine energy, light. And the second step is realizing that you are one with it because it is all there is. You're not all of it, but you are one with it. So we do have other steps, but I want to say these two steps are the most important. And this really came home to me this week when I was doing a treatment for someone, and I felt I couldn't really get centered and couldn't really do it and felt afraid for them. And by spending 95% of my time that I was in treatment on step one, knowing the truth. That there is only God, and that with God all things are possible, steps 3, 4, 5 became super easy. They just fell into place. The third step is when we declare our desire, when we create this picture of good that we would like to experience. We have the right to make choices and to become clear on our choices. We call it either declaration or realization, this step. And it does enable us to live the life of our choosing. The step of realization requires clarity. You must be clear. If you just have a jumble of crazy thoughts going on, well, things are just kind of going to go along haphazardly. But as Jim was explaining how he had been doing a particular treatment for prosperity in a repetitive way over a long period of time, it's showing up in his life on a continual basis. He has given us an example of the type of clarity that enables us, in this case, to experience financial freedom. The same thing is possible with every aspect of our lives, because Spirit responds to our thoughts without judgment, creating a tendency in our lives. Now we know we're not the only people on earth, and we don't get to control everyone else. We don't get to do treatments and prayers about so-and-so is going to do this. I don't get to decide that my son's going to be a dentist. I don't get to decide, that everyone in the United States is going to vote the way I like. I get to decide for myself. And I also get to know for other people that their lives are unfolding in the highest and best way possible for them. I think you all know the story, many stories about finding a genie in a bottle, right? Get 3 wishes. So I'm not going to tell you the story, but when you think about it, the moral is always be aware of what you're wishing for. Be clear on what you want. That's always, every version of it, whether it's fishing for a magic fish and all of these versions, it's always the same idea. Know what you wish and be clear. So the 4th step, of course, is Thanksgiving. So Thanksgiving shifts us in, gives us, I think of it as kind of a gratitude. It's like a propellant, a little nitroglycerin in a gas tank or something. It gets us moving in the direction of knowing, it's here, I'm grateful. It may not be here in the physical manifestation yet, but it exists, and I know it exists in spirit, and so I'm already grateful that it's unfolding. And of course, the 5th step is also important, release, letting go, knowing, remembering, it's done. It's done. It's happening. I don't have to keep worrying about it. I don't have to keep revisiting it. Unless, of course, I got a little confused. I can repeat it. So these are the 5 steps. I do have a handout for everyone that names the steps, and you can take it home with you. But in closing, I just wanted to share something written by a woman, Mildred Mann, who was a student of Emmett Fox, the well-known Unity minister. She wrote, and I believe it, "You are a divine spirit. You are a child of God. You have been given complete dominion over your life. With God, all things are possible. You are never alone, for God is always with you. Be positive in thought, word, and deed. Live up to the highest you know in all things. See the presence of God in your fellow man, particularly when you do not like him." Oh, that was great. "Give something of yourself in everything you do and to everyone you meet, particularly when you do not feel like it." I had to share that. And she ended with, "Meditate daily." So that wraps it up for me this morning. Thank you so much.